All right, welcome back to another School Principal Reacts. If you don't know me, my name is Brandon, and I'm a high school principal from the U.S. state of Georgia. I have not been able to wait for this moment. I'm finally going to do it. This is a very special video. It's something that I've wanted to do for quite a long time, and that is a tier list video. This is also a very special day. Hopefully, you all are watching this on the 1-year anniversary of the channel, and on June the 7th, 2023, I decided to start a brand new YouTube channel of a school principal who reacted to education-related content on movies and TV. And here, 1 year later, on June the 7th, 2024, I am very blessed to have over 5,000 subscribers when I started basically from nothing a year ago, and that's all thanks to you guys, the viewers. Just a little bit about this tier list. What I'm going to do is go through all of the different school principals from the videos that I have reacted to over the past year and do it principal by principal. Now, how am I going to rank these? I'm going to rank them in 3 different areas. First, their leadership skills. In other words, how good of a leader are they, and are they able to effectively lead others? The second area is student relations. In other words, how do they get along with students? Are they able to deal with student issues? Do they have a good relationship with their students in the school that they serve? And then third, which I have a feeling is going to get several of them in trouble, is ethical and legal standards. As a principal, you must always adhere to high ethical and moral standards and be professional. And with that, I cannot wait to go ahead and get started. Of course, this tier list, like many other tier lists, is going to include S tier being the best, A tier, B, C, D, and F tier. In case you're not subscribed to the channel and you've been with us this whole year or any part of it and you enjoy my content, please subscribe using the subscribe button below or become a channel member. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, first up, from the first reaction video ever to appear on this channel, Napoleon Dynamite. I believe this guy's name is Principal Fedine. I looked it up. It was not easy to find, but this guy I'm kind of torn on. He's presented as kind of this dry, boring principal.
This is Pedro. Would you mind showing him where his locker is? Come on.
But that's not what we're rating him on, is it? Leadership skills, he seemed to do okay. I remember from the movie, he did a decent job at getting new students like Pedro going. He had Napoleon help him. I remember during the fabled school talent show, he ran that reasonably well. I don't remember any huge problems at the school. So leadership skills, he was okay. Not the best I've ever seen, but no really major problems observable at the school. Student relations, it was again kind of middle of the road. I really didn't like, and I think I commented on this on the Napoleon Dynamite video.
Have a little something called pride. Understand?
Go back and check it out if you haven't seen it. That's the very first video that ever appeared on this channel. It's a little rough compared to my newer videos, but it was my first experience ever on YouTube. I do remember commenting, though, on how he treated Pedro. He really was not the best in terms of how he treated him for not having a good mastery of English. And so student relations was just kind of so-so, not so great. Ethical and legal standards, other than not treating Pedro quite so well, I don't remember any major issues in that area. He seemed to run the school relatively well. I don't remember him doing anything really shady. Again, I probably wouldn't treat Pedro the way that he did, and so in the student relations department, he's not so great, and he doesn't really connect that well with students, but I can't say that I observed him doing anything unethical or illegal in the movie, so I have to give him high marks on that. Overall, for Principal Fedine, I'd probably give him B or C tier. I'll go ahead and give him B tier. He did pretty well in leadership skills, legal and ethical standards. So Principal Fedine from Napoleon Dynamite, B tier. All right, next up, from the second video ever to appear on this channel, my reaction to Billy Madison, which is a great movie if you haven't seen it, or my reaction to it. Again, check it out if you haven't. The principal here from Billy Madison, he doesn't have a huge role in the movie, but he does have a few major scenes in the movie, and all of them not a great portrayal as far as scoring high in these areas. Leadership skills, he doesn't seem like that strong of a leader. He seems really passive. He comes into class to substitute teach for a day and is not quite able to control the class extremely well. He does okay in that area. So probably middle of the road, I would say, as far as leadership skills. Student relations, again, kind of so-so.
What can I say, buddy? You saved my life.
He seems really kind of stiff-necked and just not real good at connecting with students. He has this kind of dry, unapproachable personality. The thing that really gets him in trouble is ethical and legal standards, because I believe, if I remember correctly, at one point in the movie, he falsely claims that he accepted a bribe from Billy Madison, and even though it wasn't true, he was willing to go on television and lie about having received a bribe from Billy Madison. And if you're willing to do that, I mean, that taking a bribe is bad enough. Lying about taking a bribe and then going on television about it is just beyond the pale. So that's going to bring him down to, I would say, D tier for this one. All right, it's finally here, the third video to appear on this channel, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is an absolute classic. This is Mr. Rooney, principal, infamous principal. If you've seen this movie, if you have not seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you've got to go watch it. It is an absolute classic. And this guy has no business being principal, even though in the movie his title is Dean of Students. He's basically the principal. Everything about him and his portrayal in the movie points to him being the leader of that school. There are some schools where the principal is called a dean sometimes, especially in like maybe a private school. Well, let's go through the list, shall we? So leadership skills, I would not rate him that badly in this area.
Sure. I'd be happy to. Yeah, you just produce
I didn't see anything in the movie that made me think he was particularly weak in actually being able to effectively lead. What gets him in trouble is the way that he does that and his obsession with catching Ferris Bueller in a lie. Student relations, not very good at all. He's constantly trying to basically ruin Ferris Bueller's life by catching him and really trying to make him suffer for what he has done. Granted, Ferris did some things in that movie that he really shouldn't have done, lied, got his girlfriend to check out of school under false pretenses, and a lot of other things, but he really went out of his way, not just to give him a consequence, but to sort of chase after him and go to his house and all sorts of things that are totally inappropriate and doesn't portray the best image of a principal when dealing with students. Ethical and legal standards, this guy is just as low as some of the other ones. Again, many of the principals on this list have trouble in this area because they do all kinds of illegal things in the movies and shows in which they're portrayed. But Mr. Rooney not only goes to Ferris's house, but actually breaks into Ferris's house in an attempt to prove that he's not really sick and is just skipping school with his friends, which he is skipping school with his friends, but you don't go to people's houses for that reason, and you don't break into people's houses, and he just does all sorts of things that are not ethical at all in the movie. So all in all, Mr. Rooney, I would say D tier. All right, here we are, Captain Underpants, aka Principal Krupp. I did 2 videos on Captain Underpants, including the very 4th video to ever appear on this channel, so check them out if you haven't gone back and seen them. But Principal Krupp is kind of iconic, known by kids everywhere as Principal Krupp and also Captain Underpants, but I'm gonna stick to his identity as Principal Krupp. Leadership skills, not that bad, actually. It's the way that he leads that is going to get him in trouble, much like Mr. Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's actually a fairly strong leader. The problem is he does so poorly in the other 2 areas that we're rating these principals on. So student relations, I don't think his student relations could be any worse. He's constantly ripping up the comic books of the 2 boys in the story.
Oh, that tiger was crazy. Ah!
For 4 long years, you 2 have been disrupted.
And he's constantly trying to get them expelled. That's like his overarching goal, is to expel them, not even to correct their bad behavior, but to expel them. And yeah, that's a problem. That sort of tarnishes your image as far as relating well to students. Ethical and legal standards, I remember at one point he took his school handbook out and rewrote the rules and sort of added some stuff in there. You can't do that. I've seen him do a lot of other things to these 2 boys that are were completely unethical and would never fly in a real school, including, again, trying to expel them deliberately so that he can send them, I think he said, to some sort of camp or whatever. I really don't remember. I just remember his disciplinary practices being pretty unethical as far as how he dealt with the two main characters and constantly just trying to expel them. That was really his main goal. So all in all, Principal Krupp, I'm going to say I like the character, but I'm going to have to say F tier for Principal Krupp. All right, the 5th video ever to appear on this channel was my review of Mean Girls with Lindsay Lohan. If you haven't seen that video, please go and check it out. I had a few great scenes in there. This is Principal Ron Duvall, as you can see. He actually wasn't all that bad. He wasn't perfect. He made a pretty big mistakes, namely walking into an assembly of kids wearing nothing more than a tank top. Probably wouldn't do that, even if your suit did get wet as a result of the sprinkler system going off. Leadership skills, pretty good, actually. He responds to the many crazy incidents that happen in this school really in the best way possible.
Whoever wrote it probably didn't think anyone would ever see it.
I hope that nobody else ever does see it.
I remember his little investigation here of the girls in the burn book and his investigation in some other areas that happened in the movie, and really not so bad. He's not that bad of a leader and has some strong leadership skills. Student relations, pretty good as well. I remember even in the midst of dealing with the burn book and the other crazy situations that happen in the movie, he's firm with the students and holds them accountable, yet also treats them with respect, and really not too bad. I do remember him doing well in this area. Ethical and legal standards, also not very bad. I do remember him investigating this burn book. That's what this still frame is from when he's talking to the girls, and really everything is above board. Again, I might even give him S tier if it weren't for the fact that, again, he walked into the cafeteria, or not the cafeteria, but the school gym in nothing more than a tank top. Yeah, you can't do that, but other than that, really, he did everything right as far as I can remember from this movie. So Principal Ron Duvall, A tier. All right, the 6th video to appear on the School Principal Reacts channel was one of my all-time favorite movies, Back to the Future. I actually combined Back to the Future Parts 1 and 2 because in Part 3, Marty doesn't go to school at all, but in the first 2, he does, both in the 1980s and in the 1950s, 1985 and 1955 to be exact. And Principal Strickland here is the principal in both of those, which is really crazy. I commented about that in the video. Now, Principal Strickland kind of reminds me of these old school portrayals of the principal where all he's after is to get people in trouble, and a lot of times that's what you see, but it's not really based in reality. Leadership skills, not bad, kind of middle of the road. He does seem to very generally have a handle on things, and I don't remember any major issues. I remember him being at the dance, and he was really, really harsh, but he did try to keep things under control at the dance.
Party slip for you, Miss Parker, and one for you, McFly. I believe that makes 4 in a row.
And I remember him getting onto Biff at one point, which I highlighted in the movie, or my reaction to the movie. Student relations are horrible, as you can imagine. You can see here, he gets all up in Marty's face. He does the same thing to Biff at one point, grabbing both of them, smacking them around a little bit. You can't do that. Principal Strickland should absolutely have been fired and does horrible in the student relations area. His leadership skills were okay, but they weren't good enough to really save him from his rating. And ethical and legal standards, also pretty bad. You can't go around smacking students. And I remember him hanging out in his office during the school dance that he was responsible for. Some really horrible stuff from this guy. So unfortunately, even though he is kind of an icon in this movie, I have to give him F tier. All right, the 7th video to appear on this channel was my reaction to Clueless, and although there were some great characters in that movie, there wasn't really a principal to speak of, so I'm going to move on to the next video. The 8th video on this channel was the reboot of Saved by the Bell. Many of you all have said I need to do the original Saved by the Bell with Mr. Belding. I do plan to do that in the future, but I have not done so yet. This is from the reboot of Saved by the Bell, where the original characters are all adults, and Zach's son actually attends the high school that's highlighted, and a couple of the characters from the original are now adults. I think Jesse is the school counselor, and Slater is the head football coach, and this is Principal Toddman, which I don't think comes from the original at all, but he's the principal. All in all, not too bad. I wasn't that disappointed with his character. Leadership skills are okay. I do recall a point where the gym or cafeteria was flooded on purpose and he runs away saying, "Call the Coast Guard." Probably not the best thing to have done there, but all in all, it was okay. I do remember him dealing with some tough situations as far as some school zoning issues and dealing with some upset parents. He was very professional in some of those difficult conversations, so I have to hand him that. Student relations, also pretty good. I do remember him organizing the buddy system. They had a bunch of students from a different school transfer into his high school, and he tried to make the students feel welcome. Ethical and legal standards, also not too bad. He seemed to be above board. I don't remember him doing anything really shady, at least again in the one episode that I saw, so my perception of him may be a little skewed in all these areas because I've only seen that one episode. But based on what I've seen, you know, not the best leadership skills, but still okay. And in the other two categories, actually he did quite well. So Principal Toddman, I'm going to give him a B tier. All right, I reviewed a couple of YouTube videos after that, and I also looked at The Amazing Spider-Man, which doesn't really feature a principal per se. I don't really remember seeing any adults in that movie at all. The next video on this channel was Dragon Ball Z, which this guy on the left here is the principal. I don't know if they gave him a name or not, but I do remember him coming in a couple of times, particularly when Goku started at this school, and he was very kind of sarcastic and said things in a way that you just wouldn't say in front of the whole class when Goku came in. Leadership skills, if I had to judge just based on the couple of scenes I've seen him in, leadership skills, not bad.
Good morning. Today we are being graced with a new class member who actually knows how to read.
Seemed to have control over the school. I didn't observe any major incidents except for Goku and the other character just sort of running out whenever they want to battle enemies. But all in all, not too bad in the leadership department. Student relations, I would not consider him very good in. He made some really sarcastic remarks about when Goku came in. I think he said to the class, "Well, we have a new student that actually knows how to read," almost like an insult, just really kind of harsh to the students.
You kids are an embarrassment to public school. Well, go on, you may sit where...
I don't condone the way he spoke to them in the couple of scenes I've seen him in. Ethical and legal standards, I didn't observe anything shady as far as how he conducted himself or related to the students. So all in all, kind of middle of the road, nothing too good to speak of or horrible. So I would give him C tier. All right, in the history of this channel, next I did Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which again does not really feature a principal character in that film. So I'm going to skip ahead to Baldi's Basics in Education and Learning. And while this one is a video game, it does very much have a principal. If you all have played Baldi's Basics before, you know it has a principal because they probably sent you to detention many times. As you run into him in the halls, he's always looking like this, saying no running in the halls. He says, "When will you learn?" and all sorts of other scolding remarks. So I'm going to rate him also. Leadership skills. This one's kind of tough. I mean, I guess he has control of the school, but this is sort of a different school. And I'm assuming that the various characters that are running around in the halls are supposed to be doing that in kind of a weird horror game kind of way. And he seems to have a grasp on things. He is always running around the halls trying to make sure things are in order. So So I have to hand that to him. Student relations, not too great. He's always throwing kids in detention after all, and I've never heard him say anything positive to students. It's really only negative and threatening to call their parents and things like that, and saying when we learn, nothing encouraging or positive in any way. Ethical or legal standards, it's hard to say really. I mean, there are all sorts of hazards going on in this school, not to mention allowing a teacher like Baldi to walk around with a yardstick, slapping it as if to slap the student, and all sorts of other dangers going around. I've never seen him do anything unethical, but he's allowing all this to happen, which again is not very good. But other than throwing people in detention, I have never really seen this guy, who is only known as the principal, I've never seen him do a whole lot. So all in all, I'd have to give him D tier. Well, after Baldi's Basics, I did another round of Captain Underpants and Dragon Ball Z before heading to this video. This is from an episode of the Flintstones called High School Fred, where Fred has to go back to high school. And in that school episode, there was a nameless principal who appears that welcomes Fred into the school and explains to him how things are going to work. I don't remember this guy having a name, but I do remember one scene where he has a conversation with Fred and is very prominent. And leadership skills, not too bad, right down to all of the classes that Fred is in. Everything appears to be fairly orderly. I don't remember any major incidents, although I do remember the kids just leaving in the middle of the day to go have fun at the local diner, which is a little suspicious if you ask me. I also remember the announcer at the football game constantly calling Fred the big fat kid, which I don't condone either. And while the principal didn't do that, he is responsible for all activities that goes on at that school. Student relations, really top notch. He did his best to welcome Fred, had a positive and welcoming tone when he spoke to him, and even made it clear to Fred that he would be treated just like any other student during his time at the school. Ethical and legal standards, other than allowing the kids to leave, if that was in the school handbook and part of the school schedule, I suppose it would be okay, although I've never heard of that. But I didn't observe the principal himself do or say anything shady. So principal from the Flintstones, I would say nothing that really impresses me, but again, nothing that worries me either. And he did try to welcome Fred, so I'll give him a B tier. All right, immediately after the episode of The Flintstones, I headed right into The Simpsons. Check out my Simpsons playlist if you have not seen those episodes. They're really great, some really great content there, and I may return to The Simpsons at some point in time. This is Principal Skinner, a real icon in The Simpsons series. I don't know what to say about this guy. I could probably talk for an hour about him and his many pitfalls. Leadership skills, kind of so-so. I have seen him deal with a lot of different crises in my reviews of The Simpsons. Again, it's more how he dealt with those that are an issue. I can't say he was passive, though. He did what he needed to do, although a lot of those decisions were really shady. But leadership skills, I would say kind of so-so. Student relations, again, kind of mixed. I saw a lot of scenes where he was really kind of harsh, especially to Bart and some of the other students.
One volunteer.
I also saw other moments where he got along with them and was actually pretty nice to them. It's kind of a mix, but in general, I would say he leaned more towards not so great in terms of student relations. Ethical and legal standards, probably right at the bottom. I've seen him do a lot of shady stuff in order to benefit himself and his school in this season or in this series, right down to doing shady stuff to get more school funding. I remember him trying to get Lisa to basically lie in order to get more school funding and keep a secret about giving her a grade that she didn't deserve. I think it's called Lisa Gets an A, and a bunch of other shady stuff. I remember the school standardized testing episode. I don't remember what it was called, but he just does a lot of shady stuff. So all in all, Principal Skinner, I would say maybe his tender moments with some of the characters earn him a little more than F tier. I'll give him a D tier. All right after my first episode of The Simpsons, I decided to branch out and I did the first episode of the series Wednesday. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It was very popular at the time. This is Principal Weems, and actually, even though you wouldn't really expect this from a show like Wednesday, I kind of liked Principal Weems. She seemed to, even in a show as crazy as Wednesday, she did everything right, I have to say. Leadership skills, she seemed to be really on top of things, at least again in the first episode, which is the only one that I saw. I was really impressed by this scene, actually. I think, or this may not be the same scene, but she's sitting in her office meeting with the family of Wednesday, the Addams family, and she's talking about the enrollment process and what she needs to do in order to get into the school, and speaking to the board or school governance body about her getting into the school and doing everything by a very prescribed process. Leadership skills, not too bad. I think she did well in this area. Student relations, even with a student as seemingly troubled as Wednesday was, she did everything she could to help her feel welcome.
You certainly had a very interesting educational journey. 8 schools in 5 years.
Even arranging counseling sessions for her. I believe they talked about a counselor from the outside coming to school 2 or 3 times a week to provide services for Wednesday and trying to help her feel at home and feel welcome at the school. Ethical and legal standards. Again, I haven't seen any other episodes. I'm sure it gets quite whimsical, but everything I remember about this scene and her enrollment process, she was trying to make sure that she did everything ethically with high moral standard, doing everything by the book. So as weird as it may seem, of all characters, Principal Weems, I have to give her S tier. She did an outstanding job. All right, here it is. Well, after a good long run with The Simpsons, I did my first episode of SpongeBob SquarePants reaction, which was Student Starfish. Check it out if you haven't seen it. I have a good long playlist of my SpongeBob reaction videos that continue every Friday. This is Mrs. Puff. And while Mrs. Puff is not a principal per se, she does own her own boarding school, so she is probably the closest thing to a principal in the SpongeBob SquarePants universe. I'm really torn by Mrs. Puff, as many of you probably are. She does, I would say, a pretty good job in terms of leadership skills. She does run her school quite well as far as there being processes and procedures in place. She has done a good job with trying to lead in terms of SpongeBob, even in many episodes, trying to come up with other ways of teaching SpongeBob and trying to, for instance, take him to a different course to practice or switch it up somehow so that he can be more successful, and often becoming frustrated but still exhibiting pretty good leadership skills.
And how many do I need to pass?
600. For Mrs. Puff. Student relations. There are times when she does wonderful at this and doesn't give up on SpongeBob and really tries with him. There are other episodes where she doesn't do that and even is fairly aggressive towards SpongeBob in a couple of cases. All in all, kind of middle of the road. I guess if you were to average all that out, it would be somewhere in the middle on student relations. Ethical and legal standards. You know, it's kind of the same thing. A lot of the time, she does things just fine in that area in some episodes, and she just gets frustrated because SpongeBob can't seem to pass the boating exam. And a couple of times, she really just does illegal things. There's no other way to put it, right down to giving SpongeBob a driver's license or boating license that he doesn't deserve, or just passing him just to get him out of the school and things like that. Not to mention the fact that she's been to jail I don't know how many times in Bikini Bottom, so that kind of weighs on the rating. Also, I really want to give her a high rating, but with as many times as she's been to jail and as many times as she's been aggressive towards SpongeBob, even though she's been nice to him just as many times, I will give her middle of the road, let's say C tier. All right, next up is iCarly. Now, before you all jump on me about Ned's Declassified, I have not yet got to experience the administration of Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide there at James K. Polk Middle School. It's possible maybe I can do volume 2 of this tier list, in which case I will include the vice principal and the principal at James K. Polk Middle School. But the next video that has a principal that I have reacted to is Principal Franklin from iCarly. I love seeing Tim Russ in this series because I am used to him as Tuvok from Star Trek Voyager back in the day, but here he plays Principal Franklin. Really not too bad. I don't have too many complaints about Principal Franklin in the 3 areas I'm rating these principals on. Leadership skills are actually really good. I've seen him face down a few more than difficult situations where he is very measured, very balanced, very conscientious, wants to do what's right, and does what needs to be done. One thing that comes to mind is in the first episode that I looked at called I Have My Principles. He comes in even in the midst of chaos and calms the school down, sends all the students back to class, and gets the school back under control, eventually leading to the restoration of his position. Student relations also very good.
Great artist.
Look, we don't need to call her brother in about this. I'm sure that you...
He gets a little too close to the characters, particularly Carly and Sam, offering to do them favors in exchange for being on the iCarly web broadcast and getting them to sign an autograph or give a special shout out to his daughter in exchange for favors. Not a good look for a principal, but in terms of being polite and respectful to students and working with them to help them be successful, absolutely, I have to give him high marks for that. Ethical and legal standards, most of the time he does okay. Again, he gets a little too close to the students. He doesn't do anything really inappropriate, of course, but he just gets a little too close, again, offering to do things for them in exchange for favors, like the shout out for his daughter. And I think at one point he does get fired for going on the iCarly broadcast and doing the little silly games that they have. That leads to his firing, but he eventually gets his job back. But all in all, I like Principal Franklin, and despite his getting too close sometimes, he actually does a really good job in all 3 areas. So while that may keep him off S tier, I think he's a very solid A tier. Speaking of iCarly, this is kind of a surprise, but you know what? Technically, Mr. Howard here and this other lady, I do not remember her name, he was a principal in the episode I Have My Principles, where Mr. Franklin was fired for an episode, and the superintendent here in the middle, Superintendent Gorman, made 2 co-principals here for, I don't know how long they were principal, must have been a few days at least, before Principal Franklin was restored to his position. During that time, he was absolutely horrible. Mr. Howard over and over again says how much he hates children and hates laughter, and which is not very compatible with his role as a school principal, even as short as it was. Leadership skills, you could argue that he had some leadership skills, but he was just so harsh that everything he did, no matter how strong of a leader he appeared to be, it was negated by the very, very harsh decisions that he made and was completely ineffective. Student relations were also very horrible, constantly saying about how he hates kids and wants to punish them and give them very harsh consequences for just looking at him the wrong way. Literally not good in that department either.
No laughing! I hate children!
Ethical and legal standards, I've seen him do some pretty shady stuff, including holding detention and just walking out of the room and allowing people to get hurt while he's out of the room. Very shady stuff. Talking trash about the principal on the iCarly broadcast. Speaking to the students very, very harshly. Again, not good. Can you guess what this rating is? If you guessed F tier, you're correct. Mr. Howard, a very short-lived principalship, but F tier. All right, here we go. Many of you were very excited when I began to review the show Yu Yu Hakusho, and I may do one or two more episodes that you all have recommended, but this is Principal Takanaka from that show. I am mixed on him as well. Overall, I do not think he's a very good principal because of his harsh and overbearing nature, not to mention the fact that he punched Urameshi in the back of the head. You just can't do that, needless to say. Leadership skills, at kind of middle of the road. He did make an effort to get Urameshi to turn himself around. Granted, his methods were a little bit harsh, and in the episode A Promise Between Men, he did reprimand the teacher that was behaving unethically himself, doing a bunch of illegal things. He did set him straight and enforce the honor code, as it's known in that video, so I have to give him credit for that. It's more how he did it that was the problem. Student relations, not very good. You could argue that he did try to get Urameshi into his office in an effort to change his behavior, but it was more of an intense rivalry where he kind of, for spite, wanted to get him, is the way it seemed to me. And also, not to mention, he punched him in the back of the head, which again, you can't do. That's pretty much the worst thing you can do as far as student relations is concerned. Ethical and legal standards, again, you cannot do that to students. Not to mention, I saw him grab that other teacher and kind of shake him around in A Promise Between Men. When he did call him on his unethical behavior, he behaved unethically himself by grabbing him by the collar and sort of roughing him up a little bit. So all in all, Principal Takanaka, I'll give him a little bit of credit, but it's going to be D tier for him. All right, next up is Principal Wartz from Hey Arnold. Many of you have commented that this is one of your favorite shows for me to react to. I do remember seeing a few episodes of Hey Arnold that featured this character. I'm kind of torn on him. He is not that great, but he is not deserving of F tier either, I feel. Leadership skills are okay, actually. He seems to have a pretty good grasp of his school, and I have not seen many major incidents that have been outside of his control at the school, at least in the episodes that I've seen. Student relations is where he really kind of fails. He is very harsh to the students, and while he does always say that,
"All right, son, come with me."
Hey, where are you taking me?
he's following the rules and enforcing the rules, he is very harsh in the episodes that I have seen him in, and just a really kind of stiff-necked, harsh kind of character, and does not do a whole lot to help the students, really just suspends them, gives them detention, that sort of thing. Ethical and legal standards, I do see him not do a lot of obviously illegal stuff, but things that would not be best practice, like suspending a child for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks without contacting the parents at all, just suspending them. I've seen him also bring in some teachers at the last minute that were not entirely qualified, and so I would question his HR and hiring practices. Also, not so great in this area, but not terrible either. All in all, I would probably give Principal Wartz D tier. Next up is Principal Prickly from the show Recess. I recently watched the episode Principal for a Day, which really featured this guy because TJ won a contest that was kind of rigged, where he got to be principal for a day, and so Principal Prickly tried to make him act like him, and it was really pretty funny and pretty revealing of his character at the same time. Leadership skills, not so bad, although some of these things that happen out on the playground of this show, Recess, are really questionable, and it makes me wonder how much control does he really have over the school. And he's also one of these principals that is constantly trying to put kids in detention and other things, which is why I really question his student relations. You can see just in this still frame, this is kind of how he's portrayed. Always a mean, stuffy man who likes to see students suffer. So really bad student relations.
Tell me, son, do you see me breaking windows where you work? The prickly files!
and even when he was training TJ to be a principal, he was training TJ to act this way and to be super harsh to the other students. As far as ethical and legal standards, I haven't seen him do anything really shady other than, again, just constantly trying to take students out of class and put them in detention, and allowing him and his staff to be just exceptionally harsh to the students, to the fact where I'm questioning, is there any learning going on at all, which is his primary responsibility as the principal. I can't think of a whole lot of redeeming qualities for Principal Prickly, so I'm going to give him F tier. And finally, last but not least, rounding out this tier list is Mr. Brown from The Amazing World of Gumball. This is kind of interesting because had I only seen the first episode that I reviewed, I wouldn't have given him that bad of marks, because at times he can seem very conscientious and wanting to do the right thing. It's unfortunate that in the other episodes that I've seen 4 of them now, he just does so many illegal things that anything good that he does is overshadowed by that. Leadership skills, not great. I've seen it where he's done okay in this area, but I do remember when I have seen the last episode called Inquisition. If it's not out yet, it will be soon. Check it out if it is out and you haven't seen it. But Inquisition, where the superintendent is coming and he's running around trying to fix everything that's been messed up for a very long time, doesn't do that great in this area in terms of handling crises. Student relations, also not very good. I've seen it where he's a little bit kinder to Gumball and the other characters.
Oh, I'm not the one going down.
But a lot of the times he is very harsh. I've seen him give them detention where it's basically, they portray it as like a little prison camp or in-school suspension or something like that, and conditions are just very, very bad, not to mention just his harsh talking to them pretty much all the time. Ethical and legal standards, I've seen it where he had a fake diploma and he later admitted he didn't have a diploma, and so he's not really qualified to be principal. I've seen him do some really shady stuff, once again, when he threw Gumball and all the other characters into the detention, which apparently was for an entire week and resembled more of a prison than a detention. Really not so great in that department either, as far as ethical and legal standards. So as much as I actually like Gumball and this character, I have to give him F tier. That's going to sum up our tier list. I was very excited to make this video. Let me know if I need to make another tier list at a later date once I get in some more principal characters from some of the other shows that you guys have recommended. Also, let me know in the comments whether you agree with this list and what you would have rated these principals on. Just a reminder, if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below, and also consider becoming a channel member. For those of you who are subscribers or just faithful viewers, I do thank you for sticking with me over this past year. It's been quite a ride, and I do plan on continuing this channel for some time to come. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed it. I hope to see you next time on the next video right here on School Principal Reacts.